You're watching FPAC TV, Channel 9, Fairfield. We're here today with Jeff Wilson, celebrating the Fairfield Daily Ledger's 150th birthday. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. It's a special time. We had a lot of fun putting this together. We have a section comes out tomorrow that we had probably as much fun putting it together as people will have reading it.
Oh,
nice pictures.
I can't wait to see it. Yeah. I've been looking at a few that have been enticing us for when it comes out, and they're really fun to look at.
Going way back. Ron Hunterdose was in here yesterday, and downstairs there's an area where the carriers used to gather before the paper came out, and I think Ron's era was late 50s, early 60s, and he was saying, well, this is where we pitched the pennies, and this is where we played the baseball game with our pocket knives, and he said there's a lot of memories here. So it's Dean just walked in, so Dean Gabbert, and I think everybody's going to enjoy themselves.
Oh, great. Well, you're having an open house today, and we're going to be happy to share that with the community on FPAC. Cool. And inside, what are some of the things we're going to see?
Right now, Gene was busy last night. I think Gene Luedtke was here to midnight, just putting out some displays of a lot of old newspapers. The Centennial edition from 1939, I spent a quick 45 minutes, just not even scratched the surface of going through that. That was pretty interesting. There's old papers going back to the 1800s with W.W. Junkin. There was, on one of those papers, he was asking his customers and subscribers to get in and pay their debts, so things really don't change a whole lot.
Well, having the Fairfield Ledger in our community has been an important part of Fairfield's history, and it's always been community-minded, and we're very proud of it and happy that you've reached this landmark of 150 years, and I know you're really busy. I see a lot of people walking in.
You bet. Some of the stuff we have on display, Gene has things from the old Linotype and hot lead days. Larry Skinner will be showing people as far as how the press is run, and there's just a lot of things to see. And I think some of the people that are coming back, Byron, Kimball, and Ron Rominger. Ron was here 42 years. He started back in the shop and production and ended up as an advertising salesperson. So Marnie Mellon said she'd make it, so old home week.
Great. So we will actually go inside and take a tour and meet all the employees and see what goes on and look at a part of our history here at the Fairfield Daily Ledger.
Good. We're glad to have you, and the crowd is already starting to form, and this is kind of what we were hoping would happen.
Great. Congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some very special people with us at the Ledger's 150th birthday, and that is Dean Gabbert and Joyce Gabbert. And your position with the Ledger varied. You started as
sports writer.
Sports writer.
Yes, and so I did a lot of things, and that's the beauty of a small daily. See, you get to try everything. So,
and then what did you do after that?
Well, I was managing editor for many years, and finally editor, and then I ended up editor and publisher.
Okay, big job. I remember both of you here not that many years ago, but you did retire in what year?
1985.
And you moved to?
Nauvoo.
Which I know that you had wanted to move there for quite some time.
Well, I've been a river nut most of my life, so that seemed like a good place to go. Joyce retired before I did.
I retired in 1981, and Dean didn't, of course, retire, and we sold our old house on South Main. What year, Dean? Well, it was before I retired, and we lived in, can't even remember his name.
We moved to an apartment because...
And we didn't, then we stayed there until we moved to Nauvoo.
After you've been in the house for 39 years, you had to go to an apartment or else
Right. Right. Now, Joyce, you did a lot of writing.
Well, yes, I did. And when our last child, our fourth one, went to school in first grade, I started here as...
And that would have been Lisa?
Yeah, Lisa. And I began on country correspondence, and then I graduated. I never worked full-time until the last 5 years. And then when I had to come to work on Saturday morning, that sort of gave, I did me in, maybe.
Right. Well, I wish you all the best in Nauvoo, and I know that you've also written a book about...
Well, it's a not too serious river novel.
And I actually think that we have a copy at home, probably a signed copy.
Good, good.
So again, I do wish you the best, and thank you for coming back to the Ledger to help celebrate the 150th.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
all. It doesn't seem like more than 125.
Right. Thank you both.
Oh, thank you.
We are now, I'm standing behind one of the newest members of the Ledger staff, and that's Mandy Hickenbottom. Hello.
Hello.
How long have you been here?
Since June of this past summer, actually.
Okay. Did you do any work while you were in high school here?
No, I did not, actually. I worked on the school paper, the Troy Banner, but that was
Okay.
the only experience with newspapers that I had had prior.
So you must like it to be staying here in Fairfield.
Yeah, I do, actually. It's been a good experience for me. I've learned a lot, and I'm really appreciative that I got the opportunity to work here.
Great. Well, I know you're a real asset to the Ledger, and everyone seems to be moving around in here, and I did catch you here working it hard, so thank you very much. Okay, Beth, this is a little different than the first time we caught you here.
It most certainly is. I think I'd been here, 2 hours, maybe? 4?
Was that a couple years ago?
It was April 96,
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
We showed up on her very first day here and made her do a show, and you were very good about it. So what have you been doing to get ready for the 150th?
Well, we are putting a special issue out tomorrow in the Friday Ledger. It's a 20-page tabloid issue. I can give you a little sneak peek.
Okay.
I'm putting it together as we speak. And it's got pictures throughout the history.
Oh,
And,
it'll be fun. Real fun to look at.
There's a great tradition of news people at this
Yeah.
newspaper, and I'm just amazed at some of the longevity as I went through this. That the Dean Gabberts and Bill Baker and some of those people spent their entire working careers here.
Right, so you have quite a few years here to catch up. We're going to keep you.
I spent. I didn't get here soon enough to spend my entire working career here.
Right. Well, thank you, Beth. And you're really brave doing this celebration and working at the same time, because I see everybody's busy.
I think that speaks to the daily deadline pressures of a daily newspaper.
Just a typical day.
And this is a very busy, newsy town.
Yes, it is.
And
So I'll let you get back to work. Thank you.
thank you.
We're here in the, I'm not sure what room you call this.
I have no idea.
Okay, at the Ledger. And Cheryl Fusco Johnson, who is the instructor at MSAE for
Journalism class.
journalism. And I've been seeing a lot of your students walking around here checking things out, and so I wondered exactly what they were doing.
Well, we wanted to help the Ledger, Fairfield Ledger, celebrate its 150th birthday, which today happens to coincide with our last day of journalism class. The quarter ends today, so we thought it would be appropriate for us to celebrate our end of the quarter as well as the Ledger's anniversary.
Perfect. I've known you for quite a while, but I didn't know that you were teaching journalism.
This is the first time I've done this. We're just starting our newspaper. We haven't had a student newspaper before, So there was a demand from the students that they really were interested in starting a school newspaper, and because I'm a writer and love writing, I wanted to share my love of writing with the students. And we've been very fortunate to have support from the community. For example, Ledger reporter Mandy Hickenbottom came to our class and spoke to us about journalism and the demands of that profession. And we've also had help from Claudia Petrick at the Source, Iowa Source.
Okay, well that's great, and I know that you are a wonderful writer yourself, so I'm sure that the students will learn lots from you, and thank you for attending the 150th at the Ledger and helping celebrate.
Well, thank you also for helping us celebrate.
Thanks. How about I'm going to sneak over here, and I'm just going to sneak up behind you and tell me what you're doing.
Well, I'm just making an ad for one of the real estate companies in town. And,
Will this be in the paper?
Monday.
Monday, so you're seeing Mondays, and your name is?
Sherry Manley.
Sherry Manley. How long have you done this at the Ledger?
Since 1993.
Yeah. So mostly what, the graphics and arrange the ads?
Yeah, we arrange the ads. Sometimes we scan pictures and help in the darkroom and things.
Okay, so now I know the face behind the advertising. Thank you. Jean Luedtke, tell me your position at the Ledger.
I'm advertising director at the newspaper.
And how long have you done this?
Well, I've been at the Ledger over 30 years now. So I'm the old-timer of the newspaper.
Are you right now the longest?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so you've been with Dean Gabbert.
Right. When I started, Ben Taylor was still working, and I was able to work with Ben for about 4 months. And Mac McWilliams was also here for a few months after I started. And at those years, Bill Baker and Dean Gabbert and all those people were here.
So you've seen a lot of changes.
Right. It was fun to work with people like Cleo Bowermaster and Olive Schanfeld and a lot of those.
I remember
people.
Olive, yeah.
And of course, when I started in the newspaper, we were still letterpress, so we were printing everything with hot lead, and it was an entirely different process, and didn't switch to our present offset process until 1973.
Okay, so that explains some of the changes that we see here in the typeset.
That's right. A lot of the different styles of newspapering, a lot of things are different in the kind of things that we can do with artwork, with design, and putting ads and news copy together. A lot of those things just weren't possible with hot lead.
And now we just saw some computer graphics being done, and that's totally different.
Right, it's totally different, but it's kind of exciting because in the early years when we were putting ads together and had to be pretty simple in what we did, and now we can just do all kinds of special effects and stretch type and resize things, and it's kind of exciting.
Well, you are the appropriate person to have put together this display, having been here, and also you're a history and historical buff. Right. I should say, in Fairfield. So we've got some newspapers here. Let's show everybody what they are and explain them.
Okay. We put together a lot of old newspapers from the past in Fairfield. What we've done here is to bring several of the newspapers that have some major events in the past. Somebody asked me earlier, what about Abraham Lincoln's death? Well, that's on microfilm at the library. We have bound volumes here at the newspaper for all the newspapers from 1960 and up to the present. But before that, they're on microfilm at the newspaper or at the library. But here we have the historic Spacewalk, the president assassinated, and we always talk about all of us that are old enough know exactly where we were with the day that happened.
Those I do remember those too.
Yes, definitely. And I was looking for something else here recently, this past week. It has to do with the death of Dean Taylor, who was a long time. This was Ben Taylor's father, and Dean was a long time editor and also owner of the newspaper. But it has a very appropriate heading with the war years too. So. And
this paper is very wide. Compared to the others, right?
That's right. We've noticed, our pressman, Larry Skinner, was commenting earlier today as we were getting these out, that there's such a variance of sizes of newspapers over the years. This happens to be the newspaper that we put out in 1989. This was our Sesquicentennial edition, 150th birthday of Fairfield. And that was 128 pages, and I think that's probably the biggest success that we've ever had, news-wise, advertising-wise, and just a really special issue. And I guess as far as I look back, this is probably my highlight of the newspaper career, and being able to put that one out.
I do remember that one, and I probably have that one at home that I've saved.
Right.
I'm not sure if I might have one of the others. Are these valuable? Do you have several of these?
We have some of these around. As I go to auctions in different places, newspapers as such are not really that valuable as money-wise. The value's in the history and the style and the things that are in them. And I enjoy looking at the old advertisements and some of the things that are happening. I was looking through some newspapers this morning from 1975. And of course, you can remember those years and the styles of clothing and things like that. And it was just, it was a lot of fun just to look back and see some of those things.
Oh, I know. I do go to the library and look on the microfilm, and it is loads of fun. Although when you go, you better plan to spend a day,
Right.
because you get so caught up in looking at everything.
That 30 minutes turns into 2 hours.
It
real
does.
quick.
It's like a trip down memory lane, and everything just comes back to you how it was.
Right. I enjoy it. A couple of the other things that we have here, I put together an assortment of very early Fairfield newspapers. There were a number of newspapers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 1880s. Many of them only lasted a year or 2 years before they were bought out or changed hands or closed up because of lack of income. These happen to be some from 1851, 1855, the Constitution and Union, 1861, a 1886 Home Visitor, and the Fairfield Daily Journal was the one that Dean Taylor actually owned in the beginning, and it combined with the Fairfield Ledger and took the name the Fairfield Ledger rather than the Journal.
So is that the date that we're going back to for the 150th, or that paper is the one?
Well, the very beginning of the Fairfield Ledger goes back to 1849. There were two newspapers in Fairfield, the Tribune and the Ledger, and they combined forces, the Ledger taking the newspaper, the Tribune taking job printing, and the Tribune still exists today with Ross Walker too. So Tribune printing and the Ledger are probably the two oldest businesses in Fairfield, continuous businesses in the same kind of business without many changes.
Okay. And then
we also have a newspaper here. This happens to be the 1964 issue, and that was Fairfield's 125th birthday. And you can see the difference in the size of the paper in
Now,
25 years.
That's the size it was 25
Right,
year ago.
Right. And of course, this was before I was in the newspaper business, but many of the same things, you know, there were entirely different processes for doing photographs and setting type. This would have had all been set in lead with the old linotype machines, letter by letter. Two of the best in the state were Adrian Crow and Roy Schock that worked here at the Ledger, and they were recognized as being very good on the old linotype machines.
I can't imagine setting that all up.
Yes, it's a lot of work. When you think of the different sections that went into this, I think there was like 8 different sections, and I know the work that went into the one in 1989 when we had computers, and I just can't imagine doing this back in 1964 or the earlier years.
Let's look at this picture before we move to the next table.
This is a picture that actually is the possession of the museum here in Fairfield, and I borrowed it for use today because it shows the present Ledger location. I would guess right around the turn of the century. It is not dated. We don't even know what the event was. But at that time, we'll say
something big, a big news breaking.
So I would guess it was either a grand opening, or one of the things that they had very often were contests or giveaways where they had a big drawing of some sort. And with the items that are in the photograph, I would guess it's in the 1890s probably. It was a furniture store, Trombrow and Davies Furniture. It is the same building that we have right now with a new front on it. The building at that time stopped farther up than it does now. There's been additions to the back of the building. At that time, the Fairfield Ledger was located right straight across the street in what used to be Danielson's used car showroom over there.
Okay. I did think that the front looked very modern to me.
Well, it has to be an 1890s photo, I think, so I guess you're right. It does look kind of modern, especially with the clear glass above the windows and things. If we look at the building today, we can still see where the stairs goes up and where the door was, so it's definitely the same structure that we have now.
Okay, and over here we have...
Okay, I brought along a couple of other things, and this isn't the Fairfield Ledger, but it's kind of interesting to me. This is a Tribune subscription to Mrs. J.T. Miller, which happens to be my great-grandmother. And so it's kind of nice to have that. That's kind of a nice memory for me to keep. The newspapers were important to them back that many years ago in 1911. And then we have another newspaper here, sections of a newspaper that was the Fairfield Centennial in 1939. And you can again see how wide the papers were. Interesting thing is a lot of the front pages had advertisements on them, something a little different. But one of the things that's kind of interesting is supposedly, well, I suppose it was a stamped signature, but from Franklin Roosevelt congratulating the Ledger on its centennial. I'm sure it was a rubber stamp at that point rather than an actual photograph.
I see something in there that I wanted to read. I can't believe this. This tower, wasn't this one of the first in the country?
Right, that stood in Central Park, and it was one of the first in the country to provide electric light for a downtown area. I would have to read the exact story, but I believe it was one of the first in the country. Is that right?
Well, I do remember hearing something, and Mark Schaefer saying that a lot of pigeons and birds used to come around there and maybe get killed, and some of them could be in the museum.
Right. As a matter of fact, some of the birds that are in the museum are birds that were killed under the tower.
Okay, so that's an interesting story some people might want to look up.
A couple of other newspapers that we have here is the Fairfield Ledger from 1875, and the width is just unbelievable. And the way the front page is laid out with everything in columns just going back and forth without any real headlines.
Is that hard to read?
To me it is. It's much different than we have today. But things on the front page like the advertising rates and then all these little business type ads right down the line. And as I was looking at it earlier, Bonaparte store, and I'd like to know the history about that. And of course, homeopathic medicine was really popular, and we're seeing a return to that. So some of the things that we see on there are fun to look at and just wonder and think what it was
really
like.
Get a glimpse of history by just studying these.
Right, and then on the back page, the fancy stove advertisements, the guns. This happens to be a Burkett gun that was made in Fairfield, and there's one of those in the museum, and a few people own those in Fairfield. It's just interesting to look at those and see how. It surprises me how much national news was in here, and I guess I've never researched really how that far, that far long ago, how they got that. But there are a lot of national stories there. This was a 4-page issue, and this happens to be the front and the back page there.
And I imagine with that size, it would be harder to preserve.
I would think so. It would be hard to keep. I've put them between pieces of plastic. They're easier to view that way, and it protects them from the handling because they are very brittle. Another newspaper we have here is a 1861 newspaper, and it's just terribly difficult to read. You can see the complete absence of a headline. There just isn't anything there. And this was just simply one sheet on both sides, and that's what the entire newspaper consisted of. And that was not that uncommon. Very few of them went more than 4 pages at a time. But it's advertising in 1861, things like padlocks, scales, wallpaper and borders, children's, what is this? Children teething, must have been a medicine ad, cabinet furniture, Sloan's instant relief, colic medicine, all kinds of different things.
That would be difficult to read. That must be why I think of lots of magnifying glasses from that time period. I don't know.
It must be. Most of the type styles were not that small. The type was fairly large in most cases, but I think that it just seemed to be so tight, no headlines to break anything up. A page ended up being very gray. In the newspaper business today, we like to have variances so that every page has photographs or headlines to break up a page, and this is completely against what we try to do today, and I just think it's terribly hard to read.
Yes, it is. And what do we have down here?
Oh, these are a couple of Fairfield Daily Journals, and that was Dean Taylor's newspaper before he joined forces with the Ledger. And these are not the entire issue, but there were a couple of pages that were loose that I thought people could handle and look at and be able to read much better. It's just interesting to see the style here. This is 1920, but there we're already seeing some of the present newspaper style with the larger headlines, big headlines, smaller headlines, a little more of the display that we see today.
Okay, we'll take a break with the camera and move to the other side. We are looking at a scrapbook here. Let's talk about that.
Okay, I don't know how many people still recognize the name Carol Bradshaw, but he ran Bradshaw Furniture here in Fairfield for many years. He was still in business when I started at the newspaper, so I got to know him fairly well. One of the things he did was to take every ad that he ever ran and put it in some sort of a scrapbook. Many times there were old wallpaper books, and this one happens to be from 1952, 1953, and it shows all the ads that he ran in that period of time.
That was the year I was born.
Right. And I think it's interesting just to look at the merchandise, to see the things that are advertised, and I thought today it would give people some of the style of things that were done, I guess, almost 50 years ago. They're just some kind of interesting things to look at, the styles of furniture, as like rug cleaner, cookware. He didn't just sell furniture, he sold a lot of different things for the home. But it shows a nice variety of styles of advertisements that were popular in those days. A couple of other things that we have here. One is a picture of Dean Taylor, the father of Ben. Of course, Ben just passed away here recently. The two of them spanned, 60 or 70 years here at the newspaper between the father and the son. And I just like the portrait of Dean Taylor. I think it's kind of it's a real nice old portrait. And then behind that, I brought something that many people don't realize, that Ben Taylor was an exceptional artist and did painting, drawings, and so forth. And this happens to be caricatures of the Parsons College faculty. And I can't even tell you, 1929. He was an excellent artist, drawer, just did a lot of neat things. And you, as an artist yourself, can appreciate some of the things that he did. And
it would be interesting to find out who they are. Well, I do believe the names are under there. So maybe, I don't know if the camera can catch some of the names, and then you put them with the faces.
Well, it's interesting in that some of the photos are not very becoming of the person, or some of the drawings aren't very becoming. Others have smiles, and I wondered if those were people he liked, or if those were people with a personality like that instead.
Well, I can tell he's definitely captured their personality and their essence.
Right. One of the other things we have here is a magazine that's put out by the State Historical Society of Iowa, and in January 1957, they did a feature on the Fairfield Ledger, and it shows locations of the Ledger in the past. The top one is on the west side of the square, so the little building that's right next to it was the location in the 1850s of the Fairfield Ledger. And then in 1876, this is on the northeast corner of the square where Larry's Barber Shop is, and the Ledger was on the top portion of that building in 1876. And then we also see all the pictures of the people in 1957. We don't recognize very many of the people today. Of course, Dean Gabbert is here, that was still working. Dean is with us today, greeting people and sharing a lot of memories with a lot of different people. Dean started working at the newspaper when he was 16 years old in high school, did sports reporting, and spent his entire career here. Ben Taylor, of course, in his earlier years, was worked as advertising manager in the advertising department. James McGiffin essentially evolved into being the publisher and owner of the Fairfield Ledger through the family that started back with the Junkin family many years ago. And when I saw her, Walter Williams was publisher of the newspaper, and many of us remember him. I don't remember him looking like this. He was older than that when I started. So, but it's another photograph that's kind of interesting. This is Jenny Prince. And I think we have an article in a special edition that we're coming out tomorrow. She was a correspondent for the newspaper for over 60 years and doing various news stories and writing about people in the rural areas.
Oh, that's an interesting. We have one over here.
Right. One of the popular things that we do in the newspaper is our Out of the Past column. Verta Baird did this for many years, and she compiled highlights from Out of the Past. And I thought it would be interesting for people to look at this today to see some of the things that she did. She took all the years for which she did Out of the Past and then itemized them by year. There isn't every year represented, but just virtually every year is, back from the late 1800s, 1889, I guess, is the first year. And it's a nice book telling about things that happen in the ledger. One of the other things that we have here that I think is very interesting, this was a gift. I asked Ben Taylor about this before he died, and it's a gift that was given out with subscriptions to the newspaper, and it's a razor set. And as I found out since then, this was fairly a popular item for businesses to give out over the years to customers, and it has the Fairfield Ledger name on the top.
I recently purchased a razor and razor blades, just very similar to that, not in a box, but it must have been a giveaway item.
Right, and that was very popular. We think of calendars and thermometers and things like that businesses give away, ice scrapers and things today, but in those days people gave away very many useful things. One of the things I have in my collection from Bradshaw Furniture is a clothesline reel, and those are the kinds of things that you don't think of as giveaway to customers, but they were many times very useful things in their lifestyle.
Right. Now we have so many throwaways.
That's right. One of my collections, and you mentioned earlier that I like Fairfield history, and so I brought along one of my collections today, and that's old postcards of Fairfield. And as I've noticed today, many people have been looking through these old pictures and postcards, and we see a postcard here with the light tower that we just talked about a little bit ago. And this is the old bandstand previous
I do remember that. I remember playing in that. Probably in the 60s would have been? Early 60s?
That sounds right. I don't remember the exact year, but I would guess that's probably very close. I remember when the old one was torn down and the new one was built, and I can't tell you the exact year.
Which was probably in the 60s also.
I would guess middle 60s probably, and I just don't recognize those, they say. We'll thumb through here, and I'll get a couple pictures of the square. These most postcards like this were put out in the 1906 to 1914 range. The early 1900s was when these were most popular. Some of the later ones were colored like this. Many of the early ones were just simply black and white. But here we see the different sides of the square. The west side of the square, well, I guess all these are the west side of the square in several different views.
Now, will some of these be in the special edition, a sampling of different?
The pictures that I have here are just for people to look at. The photos that will be in the edition will be pictures from the ledger history, previous locations, people. We have a number of different photographs of people that worked here at various times over the years. So.
This is a really nice collection. I'm sure you've acquired this over time.
Well, it's taken a lot of time, but I enjoy the history of Fairfield, and as I found, postcards are much easier to find than original photographs of Fairfield. And I do have some original photographs here. These are not truly original; they're reprints of photographs. The great number of these, and we'll thumb back to the very beginning here. The most of these I purchased at an estate auction here in Fairfield not too long ago, and there was somebody that had evidently reprinted a lot of photographs, and I was able to get some of the different pictures. This happens to be the north side of the square. This is the north half of the west side of the square. And of course we see Dr. C.S. Clark's building. right
Famous
there.
Fairfield name.
Famous Fairfield name. And it's interesting as we look back through this original picture where the ledger was, the Jefferson House Hotel, and you can see the top of C.S. Clark building that's in that. So definitely dates back a long
Was
time.
this a square?
Right. Originally,
It was a circle.
that's right. The Fairfield Square was round in the beginning. If we look at some of the other photographs, you can see the wells on the different corners of the building. This particular one shows the hitching rack in the round square, and there is a well in the corner. And it was a round square with hitching rack all the way around it.
That's interesting. That's the first time I'd heard that or had seen that it was round.
We'll thumb through and get onto some more recent. I say recent, but they aren't really recent. But we see pictures of the square. This happens to be the north side of the square. And of course, some of the building fronts are very much the same as they were back then.
And look at those overhangs. The awnings.
Yes. You're right. About every store did have an awning. Many of them had advertisements on them.
They almost look like tents.
That's right. Well, I like to see the old cars, the street lights that were there, stoplights in the corner of in the middle of the intersection, brick streets.
Do I remember when they parked in the street? I mean, in the middle, or am I imagining that?
Those are things I don't remember either.
Sometimes you start to remember and you question yourself whether it was real or not. It's been so long.
Okay, just a couple more things that we have here. The ledger switched from the old letterpress lead style of printing to offset in 1973, in March 73. And this is a casting of the front page of the last edition that we had for the newspaper. The actual thing that went onto the press was round, probably about 8 inches diameter, and it slid over a sleeve or over a cylinder to rotate. And each one of those castings would weigh about 45 pounds. But we did what we call a flat casting of the last day, and the notice is still here about the ledger switching to the new printing press.
And what year was that?
That was March of 1973. Some of the things that we had to do then, we used a lot of what we call mats, and we would cast those in lead because everything had to be printed from a raised surface. So we'd have to cast these in mats, or for typestyle we would have to set them in and cast letter by letter. And then with photographs, we had to put them on a special machine that would actually engrave an image into metal.
Every single photo?
Every single photograph. It was quite the procedure to do. Where now we don't even make a black and white print of a photograph. We just take the negative, use the computer, and print it out right straight from the negative. And we do no black and white printing whatsoever.
That's a fairly recent change.
Well, fairly recent. And then in addition, we also use the digital cameras, which a lot of people are going to, and it just makes it really nice. Yeah. Things we can do now, it's made it
easier.
Yeah, so much easier. But that shows you some of the things that we have here, and I think people are enjoying seeing the old newspapers and things, and that's good.
Yes, well, thank you, Jean, for sharing all this with us. It's really interesting, and I know a lot of people are going to look forward to and keep their special edition that's coming out for the Ledger's 150th.
Right. And that should be in tomorrow's newspaper, and it will have stories about Fairfield Ledger's history, various old photos, and one of the things that people have come in, we teased a few people with our ads previous to the open house with the carrier photos.
Yes, I love that. I want to find out who that was.
Exactly. They will be identified in the section that we're putting out. So that's been fun. I've had several people ask me today now, was that such and such? And I said, yes, but you'll have all the names tomorrow.
Or was that me?
No.
Thank you, Jean, very much. We're down in the basement in this room. I'm going to let you tell us about it.
This is way down in the basement of the Ledger. It's a graveyard of old technology down here. It's a room that probably, somewhere in the 40s, 50s, 60s area was used by the circulation department to get the papers to the carriers. The press was just right on the other side of the wall in the basement. It was the old flatbed press where they just printed 8 pages. The print was set by a linotype machine using hot lead, and it was an era probably that finished in the early to mid 70s with that. But the carriers got their papers down here, And one day this week when we were doing the story for the special section, Ron Hunterdose was in, and there's some lines on the floor that were different in the concrete. And he said that they pitched pennies, and he said there was some good money to be had down here. And also they played that game with the pocket knives, and most of the carriers wrote names on the wall, and they're still here.
I am seeing a lot of names I recognize. Doug Rotaball was in my class. There's a Kenny Vaness. I see my husband's name, Pat Kessel, up here. He writes the same. And then looking down below, I saw his brother Bob's name. So I'm sure there could be
There's a Bob Glass.
a Bob Glass.
There's a Dan Glass on a beam over here.
I saw Joe Hartman. He even put his address, I do believe.
Route 13 was the number of their carrier route.
Okay.
So that was
Tom Holmes, Jerry Campbell.
Jimmy Evans. 54, 55, 56, 57. And in his story, he said he still remembers his route, and he carried close to 100 papers. Most of the carriers now carry 30 to big routes 50 now.
So this is where they folded them in those little things,
and put them in their bags, and they hung out here after school until the time they got their papers off the press. And probably Dale Simmons or whoever the press operator was, they bundled them up and counted them out for the carriers. And after they were done messing around down here, they were out the back door. Ron Hunterdose said that there was just a line of bicycles out in this alley, and every once in a while the garbage truck driver would give him heck for not being able to get his truck through.
I see there carved is Bob Mugin. That was a friend of my husband Pat's, a good friend. And then I see the date 1950. So this is a fun room to just reminisce and look. I wonder if they remember writing on here.
Oh, I'm not sure. Ron Hunterdose said, yeah, we were down here. I know that. But there's a David Eastburn over here. So where was that one? Oh, here, Route 15, David Eastburn. Gary Samuelson. Oh.
Kenny Allen. I remember Kenny.
So this was a place, and there was the story that Stacy did for that special section, Bob Parkin. There was a picture of carriers out front of the Ledger in 1939, and there was Bob Parkin. So
they've even written on the heat duct stuff, and
here's another one up on the ceiling, Doug Bagby.
Doug Bagby.
1963 to 1966. So.
And over here on this beam, very creative, is Bob Keller. Bob was in my class.
And Danny Glass, it says, right next to it.
So your mark is still here forever.
If they only knew, I guess.
So, thanks for sharing this with us, and hopefully that brought back some memories to you carriers out there.
Over here, right behind, that's the Linotype machine. Or not the Linotype, the Teletype. That the Associated Press wire came through. In the old movies, you always heard the clack, clack, clackety, clack.
Yes.
The Associated Press came off on a wire machine like that. And
do I remember that? Is that in my day?
When I started newspapering in the mid-'70s, they still had one in the Webster City press room.
I thought I remembered that.
And they had this over the top of it to muffle the sound, so you wouldn't hear it as bad. But it was loud and noisy, and it just all the AP stories would just go back and forth on the teletype all day.
My, how things have changed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I think we'll head upstairs and catch a few more people to celebrate the 150th.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're here at the Fairfield Ledger celebrating 150 years. And I'm going to catch over here Byron Kimball.
Hi,
Byron.
How are you this afternoon?
Good. I'm glad you could make it for today.
I wouldn't missed it.
I remember when you were a familiar face around here.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but you come in here and it's a nostalgic place to be, so it seems like it really wasn't that long ago.
So you feel right at home.
Absolutely. It's good to see a lot of the old friends that come into the office and pick up their newspapers, and it's good to see a lot of the employees that some of them haven't worked here for quite a while.
Yes, Jean Luedtke and
Right.
was here when you were here. Tell us what your position was.
Well, I started here in circulation, and then through attrition of promotion, I was made business manager and then was moved to publisher when Dean Gabbert retired. Okay. So it took Dean's retirement to get a promotion.
And then when did you retire from the Ledger?
I retired in December of 92.
92, so not that long ago.
No, not really.
No. Well, thank you very much for helping celebrate.
Well, thank you for visiting with me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Julie Johnson, you're hard at work here at your desk.
Trying to be.
This is your desk, right?
This is my desk, yes.
And you are the new photographer for the Ledger.
That's correct. I've been here about 2 months.
2 months. And I said I didn't realize that you did this because you're a wonderful seamstress.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm still doing a little of that, but I'll probably be here more than I am there.
Right. And do you enjoy doing this? It's a big change.
Absolutely. Dean Gabbert got me started fall of 1980. And I did some sports for Pekin, and after that, just a few things here and there. I did a little bit of feature stuff for him. And then I kind of tapered off and didn't do so much, and now I'm back.
Now you're back having a good time.
Yeah.
Now, you're shooting with a camera. Do you develop these in black and white?
Yes, I do. We don't do the prints in the darkroom anymore. I don't know how to do that, in fact. I haven't learned that process yet. We do all the darkroom work on the computer now. So the prints are made directly from the computer.
Okay, so I'm not even sure how you do that. This is not digital.
No, it's not digital. I process the film. I have the negatives. The negatives are scanned through a scanner into the computer, and then I play with them, manipulate them, and print.
Okay, that sounds like a fun job. Well, I won't keep you any longer, but welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, it wouldn't be a celebration in Fairfield without Lis Gobble.
Well, thank you. As your photographer's trying to hint that I also saw the first edition 150 years ago. Not quite, but I enjoy and appreciate the Ledger and want to congratulate them, and I look forward every night to the Ledger coming to my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Stacy Richmond, you are a fairly new person at the Fairfield Ledger.
About a year now.
A year. Yep. But you've become a favorite, I have to say.
Well, thank you.
And you do a lot of stories about your family.
Yep.
And it was interesting because you just said that you sometimes or always have your read it to your children so they know what's coming.
Pretty much if it's anything that could be harmful to them later, I try to proofread it with them before. But
and as they get older, they probably will be more defensive.
Yeah, my oldest daughter is not really wanting to be too much part of it already after 1 year.
She probably will disappear from the scene for a while, I imagine.
She's become my 9-year-old with no name and
anonymous.
Yes.
So, Stacy, I just wanted to welcome you after a year of being at the Ledger, a newcomer after 150 years, and you're here celebrating today. And did you do something special for the special edition?
I did do a story about past Ledger carriers, and I cleaned my desk.
Everything looks very tidy around here from when I'm in here a lot, but it's a busy place, and I imagine you have to have a lot of stuff to get stuff done.
Yes.
And we did go downstairs and check out all the names, and that was
On the
fun.
wall.
Yeah. Did you see any familiar names?
Pat Kessel.
Oh, yes.
Did you see it?
Yes, I did, and other family members. So it's fun here, and just thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, people are in this newsroom are saying if I got them that I have to get Josh, so I am getting Josh.
You got me.
So tell me what you do here.
I'm the sports editor.
Okay.
Yeah, which means, I do a little bit of writing, a little photography, kind of a mixed bag of really exciting things.
So you must be athletic to go out there on the field and follow people around.
Oh yeah, I'm running up and down the sidelines. I got to keep up with all the players. And
Actually, I do remember seeing you at taking volleyball pictures. I was trying to sneak in there on the side and take some of my own.
Yep. Yeah. It's one of the nice benefits of this job is you get to go out and see a lot of sports for no admission charge. So.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
How long have you been at the Ledger?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah.
Where have I been?
I don't know. I've been right here.
Where were you before you were here?
I was in Ohio. I was coaching college lacrosse and football.
Okay. Well, welcome to Fairfield after a year and a half and helping celebrate the Ledger's 150th birthday. Thanks.
Thank you.
Marnie Mellon is a very familiar face at the Fairfield Ledger during the time period of the...
about 10 years.
10 years.
A decade.
A decade. And...
5 editors. I've gone through 5 editors.
Wow. So you're here visiting today and helping celebrate the 150th?
Indeed. It's a great day for the Ledger, and I think it's a great day for the people that come and see it.
Yes, it is, and it's been very successful. So I want to thank you and everyone that's attended, and thank you for watching FPAC Channel 9.